What happens when the man who signs your paycheck shows up in steel-toe boots to load your delivery truck? Clayton Hartley stood outside warehouse number 9, the smallest of his 15 locations, dressed in faded jeans, a neon safety vest, and a mesh ball cap pulled low over his brow. The beard helped. So did the darker hair dye. No one would have guessed he was the CEO who bought the entire logistics company 6 years ago. He hadn't met most of the warehouse-level employees before. With over 200 staff spread across different cities, that was normal. The company had been a mess when he bought it. He cleaned up operations, built systems, and trusted his district managers to run things. Lately, though, customer complaints had started piling up. Delays, wrong shipments, damaged goods. He'd had enough of hearing excuses. So here he was, undercover as a new temp worker named Rick. The warehouse manager, a guy named Dennis, didn't look up when Clayton walked in. He was leaning back in a folding chair, boots on his desk, phone in hand. "New guy?" Dennis asked without looking away from his screen. "Clock in, grab a vest, and follow Luis. He'll show you the ropes." Luis, a wiry guy in his 30s with sweat already soaking his collar, nodded. "Come on, man. You on the early shift?" "Yeah," Clayton said. "Supposed to help with the morning load." "Cool. You ever worked warehouse before?" Clayton shrugged. "Little bit. Picked pallets, loaded trucks." "All right, then you'll keep up. We're short 3 people today. 2 called out, 1 quit last week." Clayton followed him through the maze of shelves stacked with boxes. The place was hot, dusty, and disorganized. A few workers moved around quickly, but most looked tired, like they were dragging through the motions. They got to the loading dock where 2 trucks were parked. Luis handed him a clipboard. "You're with me on truck 2. We got 4 pallets going to the store in Clarksville. After that, we hit 2 more stops. Long day." They started loading. The work was physical but familiar. Clayton didn't mind getting his hands dirty. In fact, he liked it. Around 30 minutes in, a younger guy named Mason wheeled a cracked pallet toward the truck. "Whoa, hold up," Luis said. "That one's not stable." "It's fine," Mason muttered. Dennis said to just get it in there. "We're behind." Luis looked uncomfortable. He turned to Clayton. "Give me a sec." Luis walked off toward Dennis, who was now by the dock door, sipping coffee. Clayton watched from a distance. He couldn't hear what was said, but Dennis waved Luis off with a short shake of his head. Luis came back, jaw clenched. "We're loading it. Just try to wedge it in tight." Clayton didn't like it, but he kept quiet. For now. They kept working. Around noon, Dennis barked from the shadows near the office door. "Rick, you're on pre-trip inspection with Mason. Truck 2. Clayton blinked. "Pre-trip?" "Yeah, check the tires, fluids, lights. You know the deal. Sign the sheet and get it rolling." Clayton followed Mason outside. The truck was a beat-up box van with a cracked mirror and a loose side panel. "Does this thing even pass inspection?" Clayton asked. Mason shrugged. "We just signed the form. Dennis says if it runs, it's fine." Clayton frowned. "We're supposed to check the brakes, right?" Mason looked around. "Look, man, I don't care either way. We're told not to waste time on that crap. You want to crawl under it and check the brakes, be my guest. But Dennis'll chew us out if we're not on the road in 15. Clayton stared at the truck. He knew what that form meant. Signing it without a full inspection made him liable, made Rick liable. He crouched, checked the tires himself. One was so bald it looked like smooth plastic. "Hey," Clayton called out. "This tire's shot." Mason didn't even look. "Cool. Write it down if you want." Clayton stood. "And we're still driving it?" Mason gave him a tired look. "We always do." That was it. Clayton felt his chest burn. Not anger, shame. He'd built this business on reliability and safety. And here, one of his own locations was cutting corners that could seriously hurt someone. He walked back inside and found Luis near the water cooler. "Hey, man," Clayton said quietly. "Is this normal? Skipping checks like that?" Luis glanced around. "Yeah. Dennis says the paperwork's a waste of time. Most of us know it's wrong, but what are we supposed to do? Speak up and get our hours cut?" Clayton nodded slowly. "Thanks for being honest." Luis gave a small shrug. "You seem like one of the few who gives a damn." Most new guys just do whatever Dennis says. Clayton walked to the break room alone. He sat down, heart pounding. He'd seen enough. Tomorrow, he wouldn't be Rick anymore. Tomorrow, they'd know exactly who he was. The next morning, Clayton walked through the side entrance in a crisp button-down shirt, khakis, and polished boots. No vest, no name tag. He wasn't Rick anymore. The reaction was immediate. Luis, unloading a pallet near the bay door, froze mid-step. Mason, halfway through stacking shrink wrap, dropped the roll. Dennis emerged from the office, phone in hand, and nearly tripped over his own feet when he saw Clayton standing near the time clock. Clayton didn't speak at first. He walked slowly through the warehouse, eyes catching every detail he hadn't seen up close the day before. A hand truck with a bent axle leaned against a crumbling wall. A cracked safety sign hung lopsided over the freight scale. A box labeled fragile sat crushed beneath a heavier one. He turned to face them. "Morning," he said, voice calm. "My name is Clayton Hartley. I own this company." The room went dead silent. Dennis stepped forward, putting his phone away. "Mr. Hartley, I didn't realize if we'd known you were coming, we could have." "You weren't supposed to know," Clayton interrupted. "That's the point." Luis looked down, lips pressed tight. Mason scratched his neck, avoiding eye contact. Clayton gestured toward the loading dock. "Yesterday, I watched a half-collapsed pallet get forced into a truck. I signed a form for a vehicle that should have been grounded. I saw employees working through broken equipment and being told not to report it. If this is how one location is running, I need to know how deep the rot goes." Dennis laughed nervously. "Look, I know this place isn't perfect, but we've been swamped. Staffing's a mess. Corporate's been slow to approve new hires. We're just making do." "I've reviewed your staffing requests," Clayton said. "The last one you submitted was 8 months ago. You never followed up. You didn't request backup. You didn't report equipment failures or safety issues. You buried them." Dennis opened his mouth, but Clayton held up a hand. "I'm not interested in excuses. You're relieved of duty." "Effective immediately." Dennis blinked. "Wait, hold on. You can't just—" "I just did," Clayton said. "Turn in your badge and keys. You'll be escorted out." A warehouse lead from a different location, who had arrived that morning to help with the audit, stepped forward. Clayton gave a short nod, and she guided Dennis quietly out through the side hall. No one said a word until the office door clicked shut behind them. Clayton turned back to the crew. "I'm not here to yell at you. I'm here to understand what's been happening and what you've been working through." Luis finally looked up. "You really didn't know?" "No," Clayton said. "I trusted reports from people like Dennis. That was a mistake. I'm here to fix it." He walked them through the plan. No sugarcoating. Every truck would be pulled for inspection. Deliveries would be delayed, but safety came first. Equipment would be logged, tagged, and replaced as needed. A temporary manager from the central office would oversee operations for the next 2 weeks. Every employee would be interviewed one-on-one. Then Clayton did something none of them expected. He stayed. He didn't return to his downtown office. Instead, he pulled on gloves and joined the team on the floor. Not to play hero, but because he needed to see it all. The full picture. That afternoon, Luis and Clayton loaded a replacement pallet together. Clayton noticed Luis wince as he lifted a box. "You hurt your back?" Clayton asked. "Old strain. Happens when I have to pick solo too often," Luis said quietly. "We're usually short 2 or 3 people a day. Some folks stopped showing up. Others just burned out." "Why didn't anyone report that to HR?" Clayton asked. Luis gave a tired laugh. "Dennis said filing complaints was a good way to get your shifts cut." Clayton nodded once. "That ends now." They worked until dusk. By the end of the day, Clayton had seen enough to know it wasn't laziness or apathy breaking this crew, it was neglect. They'd been running on fumes, covering for each other, patching holes in a system that was failing them. The next morning, a safety inspector arrived early. 2 trucks were pulled off the line immediately, one for brake failure, the other for a steering column issue. No one argued. In fact, a few employees actually looked relieved. By mid-morning, Clayton sat across from Mason in the break room for a scheduled check-in. He took notes as Mason spoke. Look, I know I've been short with people, Mason said. But the last few months have been brutal. We lost 2 guys without replacements. I was doing pickups and unloads and trying to keep dispatch on track. I stopped caring about the paperwork. I just wanted to get through the day. Did you feel like you couldn't speak up? Clayton asked. Mason nodded. Dennis made it clear if you complained, you'd get the worst shifts. He even told a guy last month that if he didn't like it, he could find another job. Clayton wrote that down. You're not in trouble, Mason. You were put in a bad spot. I appreciate your honesty. One by one, employees came into the office and told similar stories. Missed breaks, pushed deadlines, safety forms signed without inspections. A culture of silence fueled by fear of retaliation. Late that afternoon, Clayton met with the entire crew. I owe you all an apology, he said. I built this company to stand for reliability and respect. But somewhere along the way, I became too disconnected to see when things were breaking. He looked around the room. That changes now. Starting today, this location will receive the staffing it needs. We're implementing a safety-first policy across every site. No more pencil-whipped forms. No more ignored damage reports. And if anyone threatens your hours for speaking up, you come straight to me. He paused, letting the words settle. Also, I'm offering retention bonuses for everyone who's stayed through this. You've carried more weight than you should have, and it's time that was recognized. A few people clapped quietly. Luis looked down, blinking once, then nodded. Clayton stayed in town for the rest of the week. He didn't hide behind a title. He made calls from the break room, helped with inventory, and took notes in the truck yard. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. Employees started volunteering feedback instead of keeping their heads down. Maintenance requests were submitted without fear. And when the next shipment went out, every vehicle had a completed, verified inspection sheet on file. Not because anyone was watching, but because now they knew someone finally cared. By the following Monday, the air inside Warehouse 9 felt different, not lighter. Not yet, but charged. Like something dormant had just been stirred. Word had spread that the owner himself had worked alongside the floor crew. Not with cameras, not with a clipboard, but with a pallet jack and a busted hand scanner. Still, the pace hadn't eased. The short staff remained short, and the incoming temporary manager, Renata, was only just getting her bearings. Clayton had returned that morning, not in disguise this time, but not in a suit either. He wore a basic collared shirt, sleeves rolled, the same steel-toe boots from the week before. He walked the floor steadily, observing, not hovering, and taking notes. Luis approached him just before first break, rubbing his shoulder with a slow, circular motion. We've got a problem with Bay 5, he said. The lift gate's sticking again. We've been using that bay for the heavier deliveries, but with it acting up, it's slowing everything. Was it logged? Clayton asked, still watching the loading activity across the warehouse. Luis hesitated. I told Dennis about it 3 weeks ago. He said he'd pass it up the chain. Nothing happened after that. All right, Clayton said. We're not using that bay until it's inspected. I'll get someone from facilities to look at it today. He started walking toward the bay when a voice called out from the break room doorway. You always this hands-on? Clayton turned. The man standing there was roughly 50, stocky, with a bristled jaw and a clipboard tucked under one arm. His badge read, Travis Regional Safety Coordinator. Only when the hands above mine stop doing their job, Clayton said. Travis nodded once. Renata asked me to swing by. Said you flagged a few equipment issues. Figured I'd come see how deep this hole goes. Clayton gestured toward the back. Start with the lift gate on Bay 5. Then the tire rack by the south wall. This buckling toward the aisle. I don't want anyone near it until we know it's secure. Travis raised an eyebrow. Was that on a report? No, Clayton said. I saw it myself. That's why I'm here. By mid-afternoon, Travis had flagged 9 separate safety violations, none of them catastrophic alone, but together they painted a clear picture, neglect, layered over time. Not recklessness, just a slow erosion of accountability. Inside the office, Renata was sorting files when Clayton stepped in. How's it looking from your side? He asked. She didn't look up right away. The scheduling system is a mess. Paper shifts, no digital backups. I'm having to cross-reference time cards manually. Payroll errors? Probably, she said. I've already found 3 people who were clocked out early by Dennis, even though the cameras show them working. Clayton's jaw tightened. Send me their names. We'll reimburse the difference with interest. He stepped back out into the warehouse. On the floor near the receiving dock, a teenager in an oversized hoodie was trying to lift a box that was clearly too heavy for him. His partner, a tall, broad woman with a buzz cut and orange gloves, didn't move to help. You got arms, don't you? She said, arms crossed. The kid strained and nearly dropped the box. Clayton walked over. What's going on here? The woman turned. We're behind. He can learn to lift like everyone else. That's not how this works, Clayton said. What's your name? She squared up. Danica. Been here 6 years. And your partner? New guy. Started last week. Don't know his name. The kid looked up, breathing hard. It's Marcus. Clayton turned to Danica. If you've been here 6 years, then you know we don't throw new hires into the deep end without guidance. You help your team, or you don't belong on it. She shrugged. He needs to toughen up. No, Clayton said. You need to pack up. She blinked. What? You're done, Clayton said. Disrespect and unsafe handling are 2 things we don't tolerate. Not anymore. Danica laughed under her breath but didn't argue. She tossed her gloves into a bin and walked off without another word. Clayton turned to Marcus. You all right? The kid nodded, still catching his breath. Yeah, just didn't want to make a scene. You didn't. She did. Clayton helped him lift the box onto a pallet and called Luis over. Pair him with someone else. Someone who knows how to teach, not humiliate. Luis nodded and motioned Marcus to follow. By late afternoon, the warehouse had slowed into its usual end-of-day rhythm. The last truck was being sealed and Travis had compiled his preliminary findings. You've got structural neglect, not malicious, he said to Clayton. But it's been allowed to pile up. If you hadn't come through, this place would have failed its next audit. Maybe not on paper, but in practice. I figured, Clayton replied. I want a full safety overhaul. Start here, then move outward to the other locations. 1 at a time. You'll have the budget you need. Travis tucked the clipboard under his arm. You're not the first owner I've worked with, but you're the first one I've seen loading freight at 6 in the morning. I built my first business in a garage, Clayton said. I know what gets lost when the top stops looking down. That evening, as the crew finished up, Clayton gathered them near the front office. No speech, no grand gestures, just a few chairs pulled into a loose circle and a stack of pizza boxes on the table. Sit if you want, he said. You've earned it. They trickled in slowly, some suspicious, some relieved, most just tired. Luis sat down first, then Mason, then a few others, including Marcus, now with a fresh bruise on his forearm but a steadier look in his eyes. Clayton looked around the group. Today wasn't perfect. Tomorrow won't be either, he said. But the difference now is that when something's broken, we fix it. When someone gets pushed too far, we step in. That's not policy, it's basic decency. And it's the only way this place becomes something worth staying for. No one clapped. No one cheered. But the silence was full, not heavy this time, just present. Mason leaned forward. So what happens next? Clayton met his eyes. You tell me. What's the first thing we need to change tomorrow? Mason didn't hesitate. Training. Proper training. Not just follow this guy until you figure it out. Clayton nodded. Done. Renata's setting up mentorship pairings. You'll help build the system. Marcus raised a hand halfway. Can I stay on? I know I'm new, but I want to learn. You show up, you want to work, and you treat people right, Clayton said. You'll have a spot here as long as I'm running this company. The meeting ended without ceremony. People stood slowly, took leftover slices, and drifted back to the floor to finish tidying. No one lingered for attention. They had work to do. But for the first time in a long while, it felt like the work mattered. As Clayton stepped outside into the cooling air, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Renata. Payroll discrepancies confirmed. Adjustments in progress. Also, 2 employees just submitted their first maintenance requests in 6 months. Clayton looked out across the lot where the last truck rolled out under a working headlight and a verified brake check. He didn't reply to the message. He just nodded once to himself and walked back inside. 3 weeks later, Warehouse 9 was halfway into its rebuild, not the walls, but the way people worked inside them. The changes came in measured steps, not sweeping declarations. New policies were only as good as the people enforcing them, and Clayton knew better than to confuse urgency with permanence. A rotating support crew from nearby locations had filled some of the staffing gaps. Renata was still managing day-to-day operations, and she'd begun identifying who among the original team had potential to step into leadership. Most importantly, the fear that had kept mouths shut and heads down was beginning to dissolve. But it wasn't gone. Clayton returned on a Wednesday afternoon with a folder tucked under his arm and a quiet expression that didn't invite greetings. He found Luis near the receiving bay, managing 2 temps who were moving cartons of replacement racking components. They were new but focused, working without constant direction. When Luis noticed Clayton, he gave a short nod and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "You got a minute?" Clayton asked. "Somewhere quiet?" Luis led him to the small upstairs office that overlooked the floor. The windows hadn't been cleaned in years, but they worked. Clayton set the folder on the desk. "You've been consistent," he said. "Reliable. You've stepped up without being asked. I've seen it." Luis didn't sit, just leaned against the desk. "I'm not trying to impress anyone," he said. "I just didn't want the place to fall apart." "I know," Clayton said. "That's why I want you to take on the site supervisor role. Officially." Luis blinked once. "Replacing Dennis?" "He's not coming back," Clayton said. "And I'm not bringing in someone from outside. You already earned the team's trust. I'm just giving you the authority to match the responsibility you've been carrying." Luis looked out the window toward the loading area. "I've never run a full site. I don't want to screw it up." Clayton stood. "That's exactly the mindset I need. You'll have Renata here for the next month to show you the ropes. After that, you'll run it and I'll be checking in regularly. You've got the instincts. You just need the tools." Luis gave a slow nod. "All right, I'll do it. But I want to build it right. No shortcuts." "Good," Clayton said. "Because we can't afford any." Downstairs, Mason was reviewing the new load tracking system, a tablet-based scanner that replaced the outdated clipboards. He still moved fast, but now he double-checked every scan before sending a pallet out. He didn't say much when Clayton passed, just a quick glance of acknowledgement before going back to work. In the break room, Marcus was reading from a laminated safety guide, one leg bouncing under the table. Beside him sat a woman in her 40s, arms crossed, watching him read. "You actually memorizing that?" she asked with a hint of disbelief. "I'm trying," Marcus replied. "I don't want to screw up again." "You didn't screw up," Clayton said, stepping into the room. "You were put in a bad spot. That's not on you." The woman turned. "You're the owner, right?" Clayton nodded. "Then you might want to know something," she said. "There's still people here who think the rules don't apply to them. Not everyone's gotten the memo." "Who?" Clayton asked, eyes steady. She hesitated, then said, "Gavin. He's been skipping the dock checks. Says it's a waste of time. Yesterday we caught him loading a pallet without a strap. Said if it falls, it falls." Marcus nodded. "He told me the same thing. Said we were getting soft with all the new oversight." Clayton didn't answer. He left the room and walked directly to the dock. Gavin was by Bay 3, joking with another worker as he used a forklift to shift a partially loaded pallet. "No straps. No inspection tag." "Gavin," Clayton said, stepping onto the dock floor. Gavin looked up, smirk fading. "Yeah?" "Shut the engine off and climb down." Gavin hesitated, then did. "I've received 2 reports that you've been ignoring safety procedures," Clayton said. "And I'm looking at an unsecured pallet right now." "It's a short move," Gavin said. "Wasn't going far. Distance doesn't matter. You know that." Gavin shrugged. "You've got everyone paranoid." Half the crew's afraid to breathe wrong. No, Clayton said. They're finally being heard. There's a difference. Gavin folded his arms. So I'm fired for one bad call? You're fired for ignoring multiple directives, mocking compliance, and putting your coworkers at risk. You're done here. Gather your things. A warehouse lead stepped forward to escort him out. Gavin didn't argue. He walked. Clayton turned to the rest of the dock team. If anyone has questions about what's expected, ask. If anyone thinks the rules are negotiable, they're not. Speak up or step aside. No one replied, but several nodded. One of the newer hires, a woman named Bria, tightened the strap on her pallet without being asked. Later that evening, Clayton met with Renata in the office. She handed him a report, hours balanced, equipment logs updated, and a trainee evaluation schedule drafted for the next month. Luis is ready, she said. He's still finding his voice, but the team listens to him. Good, Clayton replied. You'll stay through the transition? Long enough to make sure no one slips through the cracks. Downstairs, the last shift was wrapping up. The crew moved with purpose, not rushed, not dragging. People helped each other without being told. And not a single pallet left the dock without being double-checked. Clayton walked the floor one last time. As he passed the central aisle, Mason called out. Hey, he said. My brother's looking for work. He's been out since the packaging plant shut down. You think there's a spot? Have him come by next week, Clayton said. We're hiring slowly. But we are. Mason nodded. Thanks. He's solid. Better with tech than me. Then maybe we'll learn something from him, Clayton replied. Near the time clock, Marcus was wiping down a hand scanner with a cleaning cloth. He wasn't told to. No one saw him do it but Clayton. You good? Clayton asked. Marcus straightened. Yeah. Just figured if I'm using it, I should take care of it. Keep thinking like that, Clayton said. You'll go far. As the bay doors closed and the lights dimmed, Clayton stepped outside. He didn't feel triumphant. This wasn't triumph. It was maintenance, constant, deliberate maintenance of something fragile but worth saving. The problems hadn't vanished. The workforce was still lean. The days were still long. But the foundation was different now. Not perfect, but solid. And this time he didn't need to go undercover to know it.